so on. So, to summarize, the ECTS system is our common currency, the learning outcomes are the common language. When the students achieve the learning outcomes, they will be paid in ECTS. The great advantage of learning outcomes is comparability of degrees and transparency. Now, sometimes people wonder about this word competency. What does it mean? And how is competency related to learning outcomes? Now, the word competency or competence is a very complicated word. There are two words in the English language, C-O-M-P-E-T-E-N-C-E, competence, and C-O-M-P-E-T-E-N-C-Y, competency. So it's even more complicated in the English language. I remember a few years ago, I was asked to give a talk at a conference in Portugal. And it was a very big lecture theatre, and I was sitting up at the front. And I was sitting next to a man from Austria. And he was also going to give a talk. So I asked him, I said, what are you going to be speaking on? Oh, he said, I'm going to be speaking on competences. Oh, I said, that's very interesting. Because I've just finished writing a paper on the relationship between learning outcomes and competences. And I said, there must be over 100 definitions of the word competence in literature. There are 247 in total. Well, I was very impressed. The lady caller was telling me with 10 minutes that that's right, thank you. So, competence is a very complicated term. If you look up the definition of it, well, this is the 2005 User's Guide. It describes it as a dynamic combination of attributes, abilities, and attitudes. What does that mean? Very vague. I have no idea. In the 2009 ECTS User's Guide, they gave an even worse definition. Look at this for a moment. A dynamic combination of cognitive and metacognitive skills, knowledge and understanding, interpersonal, intellectual and practical skills, ethical values and attitudes. Mother of God, what is that? Could be anything. Okay. So this word competence is a very broad term. A bit meaningless in one sense, but very difficult to get an understanding. I can easily run a course here to teach you how to write learning outcomes. No problem, because the rules are very clear. But there are no rules for writing competences, because nobody can agree on what competence is. So it's very complicated. The European Qualifications Framework talk about knowledge, skills, and competence as something quite separate. The European Qualifications Framework refer to competences in terms of the ability to do the work and to operate in a work situation. So transferring knowledge into practice. I think the European Qualifications Framework is the one that comes closest to the best definition. You have knowledge, you have skills, but you may not be competent. So, as well as the knowledge and skills, you must be able to perform the workplace, must be attitude. So it goes back to the Bloom's taxonomy. Knowledge, cognitive domain, skills, psychomotor domain, and then the affective domain is the attitudes. So the European Qualification Framework is quite good. I only came across one paper ever where the authors clearly showed they understood the relationship between competence and learning outcomes. Competence in terms of a broad statement. So that's what I had for competence. They were engineering. Have we any engineers here? With engineers tend to be very good at writing learning outcomes. It's probably the logical mind. But this is for food engineering. Then they wrote the objectives, using the word understand and understand. And then they wrote the learning outcomes. Describe, draw, solve, design. So these two engineers understood that competence is a very broad general statement. It's open to many interpretations, and the only way to be clear on what a competence means is to write it in terms of learning outcomes. Now, some professions take a very narrow view of competences, and that's all very fine too. So if you look at the literature in dentistry and medicine, you find in dentistry, for example, they talk about competence in terms of skills, the ability to carry out an extraction of a tooth, of a filling of a tooth, those sorts of things. They're very much skill-driven. So, the problem is that in the English language we have one word, competent. So if somebody says, you are a very competent teacher, you should take it as a compliment. It means you can do your job properly. Just like Pika is a very competent administrator. She sent me all the details about the course, she booked my hotel, she met me when I arrived at night and so on. She arranged me to be collected, everything was done. So this is where the word competent comes in. The problem is that some people try to give the word competent a scientific meaning, which it was never meant. So in the English language, the word competent means you can do your job properly. And again, I put this on the website for you, the relationship between learning outcomes and competences. Now, I don't know, did any of you ever hear of Tuning Project? No? Well, just in case you ever come across it, I want to just zip through this very quickly. But in the Tuning Project, they use competences a lot. And then, two of the Bologna experts sent me this publication about the Tuning Project, but it's full of mistakes. I won't spend any time going on it, but if somebody gives you a copy of this book, I would suggest you send it for recycling, okay? Because it is very poorly written. The authors did not put their name on the front of it, but it really is a problem. These are the two Bologna experts, and they sent me a copy of the book to review it. So I wrote a paper on it, and I got it published in the Bologna Handbook. But avoid it if at all possible. It'll confuse you very well. So. Now, with regard to the Bologna stock taking, there are some concerns that some countries are a bit slower than others in it. We worry about that. So, to start finishing up, what are the challenges of beginning implementing learning outcomes? Right. The first thing is that learning outcomes are clearly written so that we all understand them. Now, in our university system in Ireland and in the UK, we have what are called external examiners. Now, these are people who come from another university and check that I am doing my job properly. So, for example, on Thursday, I will be meeting the external examiner at my own university. The external examiner had come over and checked up on my students. He visited me with the students and saw the students teaching and looked at my grades and my reports for the students. So the job of the external examiner is to make sure that the standards in my university are of a high standard. And if he sees any areas of improvement, he will recommend them to me. So I'm always delighted to see the external examiner. And I'm an external examiner for the University in London. And when I went over there first, I asked to see the learning outcomes. Because once you have the learning outcomes, you get a good idea of what the course is all about. So that's important. So in the computer system that we have in our university, this sentence is there to help our professors. On successful completion of this module, students should be able to. Now that is there in order to help the professors to start the learning outcome with an active verb. So at the end of this module, students should be able to do the following. Okay? Keep it clear, usually between 5 to 8. Now, the one mistake that time and time again is made in writing learning outcomes is well documented in the literature. And this mistake is that the professors use the language of aims and objectives when writing learning outcomes. When writing learning outcomes, you cannot use words like know, understand, be familiar with, because they are not active verbs. If I write a learning outcome saying, at the end of this lesson, students should understand magnetism. What does understand mean? It's a very vague term. But if I write the learning outcomes, at the end of this lesson, students should be able to define what a magnet is, list the metals in a magnet, describe how magnets are used in our everyday lives, in our fridge doors, in our mobile phones, and so on. Then I'm making it clear what I'm expecting my students to do. Okay, so that's important. So the checklist is you must begin each learning outcome with an active verb. Okay? You must avoid these terms. Okay? Try, when you're writing learning outcomes, to go right across the full level of Bloom's taxonomy. You know, from the knowledge right up to analysis and synthesis. You know, how are we going to assess the learning outcomes? And do they fit within the aims and objectives of the module, which they will once you write those modules out. Are there any people here who are in charge of programs? Who would be the person in charge? We have nobody? Okay. Well, someday when you get promoted up along the line, you will be in charge of particular programs. And the rules for writing program learning outcomes are the same as writing module learning outcomes. There are things called aspirational. Aspirational learning outcomes are those which aren't assessed within the program. So, for example, communication skills. You may never assess those within the program, but you would hope that when a teacher or a lawyer or a doctor graduate, that they would be able to communicate well with the people with whom they're working. So those are some examples of proven learning outcomes from a degree right forward in the Bachelor in Science Education. And you can see there, this is listing out what exactly these students will be able to do. There are further examples, you can see there. So if somebody is thinking of doing a degree in this university, if they go on the internet, the program learning outcomes should be the first thing that they see, the very first, so that they have an idea. If I do this degree, this is what I will be able to do when I graduate from it. Okay? Again, in some cases, like in the Faculty of Medicine in my university, we have a BSc in Public Health and Epidemiology. The program learning outcomes are set by the accrediting body in the UK, in London. And we have to show that each program learning outcome maps out to the module. So program learning outcome 3 might have to do with statistical analysis. And that might be covered in module 8, so it makes it go there. That's just a paperwork which might happen. So it's not at all as difficult as you think. And to finish off, so learning outcomes are fundamental to belonging. Stephen Adams says that they're essential building blocks. Judith Adam has a lovely phrase about describing learning outcomes. She says they're like a celebration of student learning. They are an opportunity for us to make explicit, to make clear what our students will get out of our degree, what they will be able to do when they graduate with the degree. And so the benefits of learning outcomes are clarity, they help to motivate students, the students know where they're going. They help us as teachers, because they help us to focus on what students to achieve. And they also, of course, help us to clarify our own thinking. We see after coffee that they help to define the assessment very clearly. They help us to assess better. And also, with regard to compliance, this time last year I was in Lithuania, and I was very impressed by the university system in Lithuania, because the quality control organisation set up by the government, and each degree in each university has to be accredited every 5 years. So a team of international people come and they look at everything that's happening in that degree in the university, and they make recommendations. And if the degree is not up to standard, it is not accredited. So I was really impressed with the Lithuanian university system, that they really wanted to ensure that their universities were up to international standards. And of course, the great thing about learning outcomes and belonging is that it is starting a discussion. Out of the belonging process, we met professors who for the first time in their lives had an opportunity to go to sessions, workshops and lectures to learn about teaching and learning, to learn how to become better teachers. And they went on then to get qualifications in teaching at Torre. And of course, the Council of Europe has an interest in saying, what did you do to obtain your degree? They won't be asked that, what can you do now that you've obtained your degree? There are some potential problems. We must apply the rules for writing learning outcomes. It is very easy to do it, because if you have the book on one side with the list of all the verbs in the area of analysis, and you want to write a learning outcome in the area of analysis, you just go from the list to your computer. So it's very straightforward, really. It's important that we must make sure that we improve higher order thinking skills, and we must adhere to the guidelines. So to conclude, what were the learning outcomes? Oh, sorry, we'll go back there again. Sorry. That one? Pardon? Oh, I went too quickly. Let me explain it again. Great. When we are writing learning outcomes, we must write them very narrow. We must ensure that we stretch the students, that we write them over the full range of Bloom's taxonomy. If we write them too narrowly, then it is like painting ourselves into a corner. We will not have good freedom when we come to assess the students. So we must write them clearly, but at the same time, we must allow ourselves freedom to assess the students in great breadth and in great depth, particularly in the higher order thinking skills. If we write the learning outcomes in a very confined way, then everything will be just driven by assessment, and the students will only study what they think will be asked on the examination paper. So we must write learning outcomes to give us this flexibility also. And if we use words like know, understand, be familiar with, in writing learning outcomes, people will not know what they mean. These words like know and understand are very vague terms. So we must write the learning outcomes beginning with an active verb. Is that okay? Thank you very much. So finally then, what are the learning outcomes for this talk? Well, firstly, as you have your cup of coffee and tea, you should be able to now give a description of what we mean by learning outcome. You should have some idea of what Bloom's taxonomy is all about. You should be able to apply Bloom's taxonomy to help you to write some learning outcomes. Hopefully you can see the advantages of learning outcomes in terms of clarity for the students, and also, as we'll see in our next talk, linking them to the assessment. And hopefully, if one of your colleagues came up to you and said, I have written some learning outcomes, can you tell me if they are of good standard? And you see words like know and understand, then you will be able to advise your colleagues. You cannot use know and understand, because the key question you must ask is, what must the students be able to do in order to show